Hi, everybody. Welcome in to ISA Presents. This is a class on how to finance your film. We are joined today by Paulo Leite, who is a producer and a professor and an expert on film financing. Thank you so much, Paulo, for being here today to gift us with your knowledge. I know you have a lot to share, and we're going to fit some of it into about an hour and a half here. And Scott's with us today. He'll be handling comments and questions. And I'm going to let you all just enjoy what Paulo has to teach today. Thanks for joining us. We hope to see you on future events. We have more coming soon. Stay tuned.
Thank you, Molly. I think this is the cue for me, right?
Absolutely.
Well, everybody, thank you very much. I'm very happy and very honored to be here. It's great to be talking to so many of my favorite people, writers. I just before we start, I just wanted to say a few words about how I came here. So I'm a writer too. I mean, I live in Europe, Lisbon, Portugal. It's a beautiful country. I am Brazilian. I started working at 17. I started working as an assistant director on European TV, and then I went to film school afterwards. I got tired of doing boring TV shows back then in the 90s. They were very much more boring than they are today. And then I transitioned to movies. Then I got bored again because I wanted to write all my life. And I was selling scripts and stories that were not being made. It never made sense to me. I'm being paid for these scripts that won't get produced. And then I started to understand that, okay, I should learn more about film financing, and maybe I should produce my own stuff or help others produce their own stuff, and maybe produce films that I like and try to give a chance to those that I like also. So when you are working in independent films, and I assume most of you are, many times we have to wear many hats. This is true. This is much more true even in small countries, in small cinematographies, like many countries we have in Europe, where the financing is not like in the big countries. The pressure is different. We don't have the same mechanisms of funding films. So you really have to do many things at once. So I write and I produce, I do whatever I can. And I'm a big sucker for horror projects, and I always help horror writers and filmmakers who have a great horror story. And anyone really can get in touch with me. I'm always available. So today we're going to be speaking about film financing. I think quoting that great script by David Mamet, The Untouchables, there is a moment when Robert De Niro is being interviewed, and he says, "Oh, I grew up in the neighborhood, and I learned that people go much further with a gun and a kind word than with a kind word alone." And it is true. You know, I think film financing is the kind of knowledge that doesn't take space. And I learned this from practice. Whenever I'm involved in any project, I always try to be helpful and contribute in any way to the financing process, which is very complex. Film financing is not difficult, but it is incredibly complex. There are lots of things that a producer has to master, lots of things that come into play. And I usually say this to my students. When you are writing, many times it's the only time in a project where you control it 100%. If you're writing alone, if you're writing your spec script, and you do your best, the moment you start showing it around, the odds, the elements will come into play, and eventually, that's a bad experience some may have. Eventually, the thing that's going to be produced is something that we will not be very proud of. But let's not go into depression. So, film financing. Let me go to the presentation that I have for you today. So I'm going to here to present.
Sure. And I was just going to jump in quickly to let our audience know that we will be taking questions a little bit throughout. So feel free to ask questions anytime. And I'll be checking in on that all the time. And we will have more questions. So if yours didn't get answered in the moment, there's still a chance that we will answer it at the end. So hang with us. And again, I just want to thank everybody for coming. I'm seeing everybody, England, Georgia, Nevada, Hollywood, all over the place. So thank you all for joining us. I'm going to go off camera, but I'm going to be here and you'll be hearing my voice pop in throughout. So have fun. I can't wait to learn.
Thank you, Scott.
And also, yay, horror movies. What a great community horror filmmakers are.
Yeah, we give the best parties.
Amen.
So share screen. I go here on the financing, allow. Okay. So I suppose you are watching now my PowerPoint. So I'm going to go straight into the first slide. So basically, there are 10 classes of financing, of film financing. There are 10 classes of mechanisms, let's call it that way, that are available to films, TV shows, web series, any kind of audiovisual content, really. Okay, this division that I give, I haven't seen it anywhere, but it's very simple to you'll understand it along the way. So I won't go a lot into explaining why I divided this way. It's going to be very clear. So the first class is called public funding. It's something that we have a lot here in Europe and in other countries. You don't have it a lot, and you have very little of it in America. Almost non-existent. And I will talk about it a little bit and show you how it works. Then we have tax incentives. We have also international co-production. Then we have TV and platform funding. Then we have pre-sales, advertising, equity financing, licensing, crowdsourcing, and finally awards and grants. So all the kinds of financing mechanisms, they kind of fit in one of these 10 categories. So like I said, there are 10 types of 10 classes of funding for films: public funding, tax incentives, international co-production, TV and platform funding, pre-sales, advertising, equity financing, licensing, crowdsourcing, and finally awards and grants. Okay, so like I said before, most of the incentives, most of the kinds of funding mechanisms and schemes, they fit into these categories, and I'm going to be explaining which one, all of the subdivisions in these categories, so you can have a good view on what they can bring us to our films. So starting with public funding, there are 4 types of public funding. We have national film funds, transnational film funds, regional film funds, and then we have something called the territorial support funds. The national film funds, usually they are launched by, they are controlled by public usually the Ministry of Culture. They are available in Europe, in all the European countries, I would say, South America, the Middle East, some African countries, Canada, all across Latin America, some Asian countries, not all. And usually the money comes from taxpayers. Occasionally there are a few who have different alternative ways of funding the money, so not from the national budget. In Portugal, for example, it comes from a tax that is paid by companies that buy advertising time on television. For example, when Coca-Cola puts an advertising on Portuguese television, there is a tax that will go straight to the National Film Fund. And national film funds, here are a few examples. We have the CNC in France, the ICA in Spain, the Argentinian INCA, Portuguese ICA. And most of them, they have a very wide number of areas of intervention. They have funding for development, production of films, feature, documentary, animation. They have funding for first-time directors. They have also funding for the production of animated films, short films. There is also here on the bottom left, you can see automatic funding, which is usually a type of funding selected for films for producers that had a big success on the previous year, funding for post-production, marketing, distribution, etc. These national film funds all across the world, they have different sizes and they have different levels of generosity. France, the UK, Germany, they can fund millions of dollars in one project, for example. Smaller countries like Portugal can only fund up to $500,000. I'm saying dollars, but the euro and the dollar they both are very similar. The exchange rate is very similar. Smaller countries in the Balkans, for example, they have a much smaller film funds. They rarely go above 100,000 euros or something like that. So there is a wide variety of type of amounts of money that they can contribute to films. Then we have the transnational film funds. The transnational film funds are funds that are controlled by the participating countries. They are put together by different countries, and they usually look for support. They usually support co-productions. Eurimage is an example with 38 countries plus Canada. Ibermedia is another example with 18 Latin American countries plus Portugal, Spain, and Italy. Creative Europe is another one with 28 European members plus a number of eligible countries. And what they do basically is they support the development, they support the production. They also have a number of schemes for financing films. Usually what they like, because they are transnational film funds, what they do is they focus on co-productions. So 2 or 3 or 4 countries or more, they come together and they apply for that type of financing. Usually there are some differences between these transnational funds and the national film funds. The national film funds, they usually look for art house projects. Usually they have a cultural angle, and the decision making is very subjective. So there are juries made of intellectuals, artists, journalists, critics, and they are the ones who select films. In these transnational film funds, the angle is much more wide. They look for the artistic content, obviously, but they also look for projects that have a financing, the ability in terms of their own financing. They are also looking for projects that will conquer a large number of audiences, if possible. So these are so the evaluation is different. And also the competition is tougher, because when we're talking about transnational film funds, you are in a small country, let's say you are in Greece, and you are competing with Pedro Almodóvar, Lars von Trier, and all the big filmmakers in Europe, in this case. And the same thing happens in Latin America and all other places where you can find these funds. These are the regional film funds. Regional film funds, they exist usually around a city, a region. We can find them also in Europe, in Latin America, also in some Middle East countries. And you can see here a few examples: the Copenhagen Film Fund, a London Film, Vienna Film Fund Vienna, Krakow Film Commission. And usually what they do, they are managed by local governments, okay? Meaning that they come from taxes or from the budget of those cities or regions. And the goal here usually is completely different from the national film funds. Usually what these funds are looking for is to attract foreign productions, or sometimes also national productions too. But they must be shot, they must be produced in that city or in that region or in that area covered by this type of fund. What they usually do is they give you money, but they demand that you spend the money there. For example, some of these funds will give you, let's say, 200,000 euros, and they will demand that you spend those 200,000 euros, and then you bring 200 more of your own money. So, which is great for producers, because if you can spend the money there, suddenly 200,000 euros become 400,000 euros. And this is incredible it's very helpful for producers who can dislocate their crews, or they can hire the crews from those cities and those regions, which is usually one of the rules that they have. If you are bringing, for example, your film to a region and you want money from these funds, they will frequently say, okay, you have to hire technicians or you have to hire companies from these regions. These film funds, they usually exist based on the idea that film, when it comes to a city or for a region, they will be leaving a lot of money there. And I have this experience when I shot in cities that had those types of financing schemes. So the angle here, the decision making process here is also very simple. They are looking for the best type of project that will leave the most money, and they will try to help you in any way they can. I mean, they will try to make sure that you have all the kind of crews, the kind of work, the kind of facilities, in order for you to leave your money there. And they will also help you to get permits. They will help you with locations that may be difficult to get otherwise. So these things are very helpful to producers. The fourth type of funding, public funding, they are called the territorial support funds. These funds, they are slightly different than all the others. Usually they come from richer countries that have well-developed film industries, and they usually want to help smaller countries with less developed film industries. And they usually create these mini funds, these smaller funds, to help those countries. Here are two examples. Norway has the SOR fund, and we call it the Cinéma du Monde, which is a French fund. And they usually are aimed at co-productions with less developed countries. And they usually go to those lists that are published by the UN with developing nations. And they say, okay, we want to help these 60 countries. And you can see lots of African countries, Asian countries, Latin American countries that have a less developed film industry. And the way they work is very interesting. Let's say that, for example, you have a Mozambican film that you want to produce. You are a Mozambican producer and you want to make the film. So you go to, you get a co-production with a Norwegian producer, and the Norwegian producer will apply to SOR fund. And what will happen is that the money will be given to the Norwegian producer, who will funnel the money to the Mozambican producer. And in many of these funds, they want the film to be shot in the original country. They want the language to be the language of that country, and the actors and the crew will be hired in those countries, which is basically, it's fascinating because they are basically paying for a foreign film. Most co-productions, they rely on a pro rata deal, where, you know, if you put 50% of the money, you get 50% of the crew and 50% of the actors and everything. In these cases, they don't work like that. So basically, they are funding films that come from smaller countries. The downside of these funds is that, in many cases, these funds are limited in terms of time. They come and go. These two are fairly consistent. I think the Cinéma du Monde still exists, but some of these funds are very short-lived, and but they are a great way to finance projects that otherwise would never be produced. Now let me stop sharing. And do we have questions so far?
Yes, sorry, just had to get my mute turned off. So you've shared a lot of names of organizations so far, but Garrison is wondering, is there maybe a central place where people can find quick links and contact info where it's all together? Or do they have to do a lot of individual research?
Well, you have to do a lot of research because it depends on which countries you want to work with. That depends on where you are. That depends on your context. There used to be a website called OLFI, OLFFI, I think, that used to do a kind of compendium of different institutions where you could investigate. But here's the thing: all of these types of fundings, because they are from governments, they are very transparent. If you Google them, you go to the websites, and the good thing is that the schemes are laid out very, very clearly. The documentation they need is very clear also. the deadlines are also published well in advance, and if you can manage to work with them, fine. The big problem, especially for Americans, is because those funds usually they are looking for the development of, especially the national film funds. They are looking for developing their own cinematography. So you have to be a Portuguese filmmaker with a Portuguese film company to apply for a Portuguese film fund. These are the national film funds. All the other ones, either the transnational that demand co-production, you also have to be from those countries. The transnational film fund, the regional film funds are the ones that are more open, and those you can research. The regional film funds also, they are kind of transitory sometimes, because they come from local governments, and those governments sometimes you change the mayor, and change the party, change the mayor, and the interests completely change, so they come and go. But I would say that a producer should do some research.
Okay. And then a couple questions about American filmmakers. You just talked about that a little bit, but the idea is, though, that American filmmakers can find funding and shoot overseas. That's a big part of this presentation, I believe. And actually, another viewer, Liska, commented on that. A great number of American movies are financed this way, so it's good for American filmmakers to learn about this too. You also need a local production company to partner with. Anything you want to add to that idea?
Well, you have access to those funds through a co-production, which I'm going to be explaining in a few minutes.
Perfect.
I usually do this with friends of mine. I'm open. I have a company also, so you can call me and discuss this with me. But many times you can go in. Usually, the good thing is that many of those funds, especially the national film funds, if you talk to them directly, they will be very helpful in hooking you up with producers from the country. So that's how it usually works.
Sure.
Can we continue?
Let me really quickly. So I think this is an easier, quicker answer. And if you do have a question we haven't gotten to, we might be able to still get to it at the end.
Okay.
So you do have to film in these respective countries, correct?
If you are looking for money from those countries through those funds, usually you do. The national film funds, many times they will ask you to spend the money there. Not always. Okay. In cases where you don't have to spend the money there, they also will give you percentages of what you can spend. The regional film funds are the ones that are more strict, because they really are looking for the money that you bring from either abroad or from another part of the country. The transnational funds, they are more open. They usually care about the nationality of the people involved in the companies.
All right.
But the good thing is that many times you can negotiate. If you are in a relationship, in a co-production relationship that sometimes does not fit exactly the standard, there is also some room for discussion and negotiation.
Okay. And then a quick one. What's the name of your gosh, it keeps moving. All right. What's the name of your company, Paulo?
My company is called Bad Behavior. So I love to do. We are renewing our website. We're going to have that very soon, because we are including films that we produced recently. I love genre stuff, horror, fantasy, but I'm also looking to do documentaries and which I never did before, and art house. I'm trying to expand. So I love films. I grew up with films like all of you, so I'm open to anything.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll let you continue, and we'll check back in a little bit.
Perfect. So let me go back to present, share screen. Yes. Okay. So continue. The next type is tax incentives. There are also 4 types of tax incentives, or 4 classes of tax incentives. Tax exemption, tax rebate or tax refund, tax credit, and tax shelter. Now, tax exemption and tax rebate are very similar, okay? Many of you live in states that have, for example, sales taxes or VAT taxes. We have in Europe very high taxes when it comes to that. Portugal, for example, has 23% VAT. It's crazy. I know, for example, in America, California, I think New York. Some certain states have a very also high taxes of 7.5%. I think in California, not exactly sure the number, but something like that. And many European countries also have high taxes in terms of sales taxes or VAT taxes. Tax exemption and tax refund, and tax rebate, they work similarly. In the case of tax exemption, a producer, okay, goes to the government. The government, by the way, launches the call for these types of incentives, inviting producers to apply, which means that producers from different countries or even from the same country, they apply with their projects. They say how much money they're going to spend in the country, and the government will say, okay, if you spend that money here on those eligible expenses, and they have a list of them, we will give you an exemption of the sales taxes. So if you pay X% in sales taxes, we are going to give you a cut of 80%. Okay. So in the case of tax exemption, the first type, they're going to issue a documentation that will allow you to skip the tax whenever you are making a purchase. So when you are booking hotels, renting cars, paying for catering, renting equipment, paying the crew, all of these taxes that are included in those payments will be either erased completely, which frees up money that you can put back into the project, or they will take out a percentage of those taxes, okay? So that's how it works. For the producer, it's great because you go to shoot in one of those countries that with high taxes, and suddenly that percentage that you would be spending, now it's freed for you to put it back into the production. And the good thing is that with the tax exemption, that economy, that saving happens right away. In the case of the tax rebate, it usually happens at the end of the production. Okay, so there is the processes that are similar. You get a documentation that will say that the government will give you back that percentage of the taxes, but it will come at the end of the production. So once you wrap up the production, you have your accountant, you send the accounting to the government. They will obviously explain in the process. You will be explain what you have to submit to them, and they will give you the money back. So the money that you spent on those taxes will be sent back to you. It usually will come either as cash money to your bank account, or in some cases they will give you a tax credit for future taxes that your company would pay in the country. In cases, now you can say, okay, but I'm a foreign company. I don't want to have the credit. I want the money. In many cases, they allow you to sell those credits to national companies that will try to lessen their tax burden, and that's good. They will not. You will not sell dollar for dollar, but you will pay. You will sell that for almost dollar for dollar, something like 85% or 90%, something like that in some cases. But they're basically the same thing. The difference is that in the tax exemption case, you save the money right in the beginning when you make the purchases, and in the tax rebate, you will get the money back at the end of the production. Okay, the concept is the same. The difference is when you actually get the saving. The tax credit is a slightly different thing. Usually, we're talking about the process is similar. So the government issues the call for producers, and what they're going to do here is that they're going to pay you back at the end of the production, not the amount of tax that you paid in sales taxes, for example, but they're going to be giving you back a percentage of the expenditure, of the entire expenditure. Okay. And some countries are quite generous. Portugal, for example, has a tax credit scheme that goes up to 35%, 30% of selected expenditures that you do in Portugal. Turkey has this. Italy, Spain, France. I would say majority of many European countries have forms of these tax incentives. Latin America also has them. Many countries do this. I think in American states also have this. So different states in America are famous for having tax credits or different schemes. Now the tax shelter is a completely different animal. The tax shelter was, I think, the Belgians perfected the formula, and other countries followed suit. Brazil has a tax shelter. Italy also has them. Ireland, I think, also has one too. The tax shelter works in a different way. The tax shelter usually works like this. The government also issues the rules for the tax shelter, and the way it works is like this. A producer has a project, okay, and you go to a lawyer that is specialized in those types of financing. We give them a credit like an executive producer or something, and this person is going to go to companies that pay taxes in the country, and they are going to get money from those countries that will be funneled into the film. Okay, let's say, for example, you are in Belgium, and a Belgian company will give you $100,000 for your film. What happens in the tax shelter is that then the Belgian government will allow that company to deduct not only the $100,000 that they gave you, but there will be a majoration of 40% on top of that money. So if the Belgian company gives to a Belgian film 100,000 euros, they will deduct at the end of the fiscal year 140,000 euros. So there is also this candy, this little candy that is given on top of the money that the companies give to films. And the good thing is that with the tax shelter, in many cases, not all, in many cases, or in most cases, the companies have no say in the project. So they don't have equity. They do not have a word on the script. It's just a tax incentive. Some schemes have been created over the last decade that will allow the so-called investors to have a chance to earn some money from the film, a small percentage, just to make it more interesting. Okay, but these schemes are fairly new. The idea and the name tax shelter, as you can imagine, comes precisely from the concept that different companies will shelter themselves from paying taxes by funneling some money to film productions, and then getting that extra 40% or 50% in some cases on top of it at the end of the fiscal year. Questions so far?
Okay, so let's see what our recent one is. So regarding taxes, this is from Linda. Put it up here. How does the writer work with accountant or financial specialist to make sure you're doing it all lawfully and getting the maximum benefits? And I think to add on to this, would you want someone in that region, an accountant in that region that would know?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The bad thing about these tax incentives is that not the first two, especially the tax credit and the tax shelter, they are incredibly complex to navigate because it's public money. There used to be scandals of fraud in the past, so they toughen up their legislation and their rules, and they will need real accountants. So I would always suggest, and any producer will come to that conclusion, that it's good to work with an accountant that is from that country and will handle that part and already has experience with that, because we're talking about very fairly deep fiscalization about how you really spent the money to make sure that unscrupulous producers didn't take advantage of it, because it happened in the past.
Yeah.
So every time this happens, the tax authorities wise up, and also they should. Now for an American producer, you can also get in touch with a local producer from the country, and then through them, if they become co-producers, they can get their own share of the production through those schemes. Those, in case of the tax shelter, usually what the government does is they say, okay, for the company, you can only put on films a small percentage of the tax that you would be paying. So that executive producer I told you about, he or she will be going to many different companies, to make up for the entire budget that you need. And also, you cannot, in most cases, you cannot fund the entire budget. Okay, usually they will allow you to go for 40% of the entire budget, or 50% of the budget, or less, and that's also good. It's very helpful.
Certainly. Yeah, you're not going to be making a film for free. You're going to have to find some other financing somewhere. This is talking about potential and fears of fraud. This is kind of a good segue into kind of the dark side, unfortunately, but it's out there. Anytime you're talking about finances, there's going to be people that you can't really trust. And so there's a mention here about scams that exist out there, and being aware of this person's talking about one in particular. But for you yourself, Paulo, how do you stay alert, and what do you look for, I suppose, to find an organization that's legitimate versus something that might be a scam or fishy, at least?
Well, you go to film festivals and markets, and you meet people. You meet producers, you meet people who are legitimate. Usually, you should never go. It's for life. It's the same advice for life. You don't get married to someone you just met, right? You first meet the person, you talk to them. They made films and what kind of films they do. You talk to them and you meet them. The good thing, that's something interesting to talk very briefly. People should go to film festivals and film markets. Okay, you have a great one that I usually attend, the American Film Market in Santa Monica. But there are smaller ones, for example, around film festivals. I mean, Telluride has a great one also. Toronto. Sundance also. So there are many places where you can meet producers and people who work with this. And if you want to engage in a professional relationship with them, that's a great way to meet people. Online, you should never do this online, because online is what it is.
That's a really, really good point. And let's see, just quickly, just in case this wasn't clear, he says, what about a fiscal sponsor for a film that isn't a documentary? Everything that you're talking about here is for all types of filmmaking, correct?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. I will be speaking about documentaries specifically regarding a different type of financing later. But still, documentaries are also a possibility for tax incentives.
Sure.
Of course. Okay, moving on.
Okay, yep.
So I have to go again, share screen. Share screen. Okay, so our next type is called, number 3 is on international co-production. Okay, so international co-production exists when two or more companies, they bring together different assets, different valuables, let's call it that way, that will help them make the film. I may need a co-production if I want crew from a different country, if I want actors from a different country to enhance my production potential. There are many reasons why a producer may want co-production. So there's always a leading co-producer who may not have 50%. In many cases, he or she does have over 50%, but the leading co-producer is a leading co-producer because he or she has the majority, okay? Maybe less than 50%. Now, there are something called the co-production ratio, which is important here. It's very simple principle. So the percentage of budget invested tends or should be equal to the money spent by that producer in that country, which should be equal to the creative contributions by nationals of that country, which should be equal to the revenues sharing, the revenue sharing from for that producer or that country. So this is called what we call the co-production ratio, okay, which would be a reflection of this. So if I own 45%, 45% of the input should come from me, 45% of the crew should come from me, and so on. And 45% of the revenues also should come, of the liquid, of the ending, should come from me, whatever is left. We'll talk about that if we have the time. There are basically two types of co-production, okay? There are the official co-productions, also called formal co-productions, or also called the treaty co-productions, and then the non-official co-productions, also called informal co-productions, or also called non-treaty co-productions. The difference between them is that the official co-productions, they are regulated by treaties that are accepted, that are signed by both countries, okay? So for example, if if Canada wants to co-produce with France, they have a co-production treaty that regulates how the co-production works. And you can ask, why does it matter? It matters because if you are co-producing with a country, you want to have access to your national money that's available to your film. So if I am a Portuguese producer and I'm co-producing with different countries, I want to have access to my film funds. And like I said before, film funds usually require that the film is Portuguese. So the treaty between Portugal and whatever country I am co-producing with will regulate what conditions we have to fulfill in order for the film to be both recognized as Portuguese in Portugal, and French in France. And if there is a third co-producer, let's say Finland, the film will also be considered Finnish in Finland. So the three of us will have access to our own national film funds, because the film will be simultaneously Portuguese, French, and Finnish. So it matters that you are working in an official co-production if you can fulfill the conditions of the treaties. And by the way, the conditions of the treaties usually hammer this co-production ratio. So if you fulfill the co-production ratios of minimums and maximum percentages that the treaties regulate, you're fine. So you know that you are going to be recognized as national in all of those countries, which is a good help for producers who are looking for complementing their project with money from other countries without losing the nationality status. Now, the non-treaty co-productions or the non-official co-productions, on the other hand, because they don't have a treaty, sometimes you will lose that ability to have financing from film funds, from national film funds. Sometimes it matters, sometimes it doesn't matter. So that's why there are those two types of co-productions, and they are so widely found. A few examples. Co-production treaties can be bilateral. Let's say Brazil and United Kingdom, Canada and France. They can be trilateral. Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Germany, Austria, Switzerland. Or they can be multilateral. In Europe, we have something called the European Convention on Cinematographic Co-production, which is a big mega treaty that covers over 40 European countries. So we can co-produce freely with each other, and if we fulfill the rules of the treaty, of the convention, we are okay, which is something that's very good. And by the way, when you see these trilateral treaties, you can see that they are usually between countries that have a well-oiled co-production experience. Usually, for example, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, the Benelux, or the Scandinavian countries, or Germany and France, or France and Italy, Spain and Portugal, or Portugal and Brazil. So many of these countries have these treaties because they want to be in a cultural relationship together. By the way, Canada, and I'm sure there may be Canadian writers here, Canada, I think, is the country that has the largest number of treaties, which is amazing because Canada it takes the best of both worlds. It's right above the United States. It sucks a lot of the American production, and it also has great relationships with Canada, with Europe. And remember, when I was talking about the Eurimage Film Fund, the transnational film fund, it includes Europe and Canada. So because of that, Canada roughly pays for only 40% of the films it produces, because they are so used to co-producing with European and countries that they have treaties with everybody, with many different countries. So it's very good for Canadian producers, and not only. So let me now finish this. Okay, questions?
No, I don't think anything came in just now, but
Good.
I just want to shout out that, I know Romania, and so much has been going on out there. And I'm always surprised how often I'll see Ireland in the credits of movies or TV shows that I'm not expecting. They're very active.
Some countries are very smart, either because in the case of Ireland, they speak English, so they are an entryway to Europe. So they are very smart. Romania is a great example because they used to have a public television that went bankrupt, I think. decades ago with the fall of the Soviet Union. And they reconverted a lot of those equipments, a lot of those facilities to top-notch facilities for film. And they were also very smart. Many countries have done this over the years, and many European and many American producers take advantage of that, either through co-production. They will be non-treaty because Americans don't have treaties with any country. So the co-productions Americans do will be usually they will be non-treaty, but Americans are very smart also, and they can do also many deals with local producers, or they can have own percentages of companies in those countries, and they always get also public funding in many different ways.
Just acknowledging this because you just were talking about it as the question came in, but does the U.S. have to have treaties? Apparently not. No. Really.
It doesn't. It doesn't because for many reasons. America first, you have a different type of government. You have the states. The states have a lot of power, which is not usually what happens in Europe. The countries themselves don't have a lot of regions with a lot of power like Americans do.
Sure.
I think this has to do with, it's one of the reasons why it's so difficult for Americans to do treaties in that sense. But you never know.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you carry on.
But so far, the American industry hasn't suffered a lot for not having. Like I said, there are many ways to work around, and either through a co-producer, even if you don't have a treaty, the Americans can get some of that money too, and they do. There are many American films that are also shot in Europe or made in Europe through co-productions.
Absolutely. All right, let you go on.
Okay, so let's share the screen again. Okay, so the next type, we're going to be talking about TV and platform funding. So let's start by defining the universe. We have usually the usual suspects. We have the free-to-air television channels. They have been around for decades, since the TVs since the television was invented. Then came along the cable channels, that today they are part of bundles. I mean, in 30 years ago, you would buy each one by one. I remember when I was a kid, I went to America and I saw a friend of mine had MTV, and it was like the world, amazing. But today, today we have hundreds of cable channels on the same set-top box. Then in recent years, we had the video on demand because of the digital revolution. Now we have SVOD, or subscription video on demand. Some of them usually also called OTT, over the top, so you don't need service provider. You don't need AT&T or whatever service that gives you television. You can go online directly and access the service. That's what they call over the top. We also have AVOD, ad-supported video on demand. Some of them are also OTT. You don't need a service provider to give you that. You don't need I don't want to say AT&T, but that's what comes to my mind right now. Also, there is the TVOD, transactional video on demand. Some of them are pay-per-view when you rent the files, and they are available for you for 25 or 48 hours or something like that. Then you have the EST, electronic sell-through, when you pay to own the files yourself. I'm very critical of these as a user. I'm very critical of these services. I still prefer discs, but that's my own personal taste. So when it comes to the financing, usually there are four types of relationships. So on A, broadcasters and platforms will finance projects in exchange for exclusive rights to show the project in their countries for a limited time. Then we have type B. Broadcasters or platforms will also invest additional money and become co-producers, having a share of the projects wherever it goes in international sales and everything. Then we have C. Broadcasters or platform may also commission a certain project to a producer, funding it completely and keeping, usually when they fund the project completely, they also keep the rights completely. So that's also a very, very common rule. And then eventually on D, they also can arrive late at the project, usually in film festivals, when they see a project that really, really they like very much, and they buy it outright. And then it becomes something like A, or it becomes something similar like B. But the difference here is that they come later in the project. Now, the process, and many of you may be familiar with this, usually is a two-step project, two-step process. So the commissioners or editors or the people who commission commissioners from platforms or channels, they will usually start with a contract with the producer for development, when they will agree to pay for the development of the project, pay for the writing, for most of the writing, then the casting and looking for locations, location scouting, and putting all the production from the ground up. And then at a certain point in the contract, the project will be either selected for production, and then it becomes it will be produced with a new funding, with a continuous funding, or it may be dropped, and it dies there. Sometimes it doesn't, but I won't go into that now. In those cases, then there will be a new contract for production, and then there will be scheduling, there will be further budgeting, there will be production, shooting, post-production, and finally will be delivery. Now, the amounts that are financed, the amounts that are paid, they vary a lot. Usually, the broadcasters have this issue because, as you know, the broadcasting channels, they work with a schedule. So they work whenever you are when you turn off the TV, they're still going, right? So they have slots, and usually they will pay what is usual for that slot at that day at that hour. So the amounts will be usually fixed, and it usually has to be the content that has to adapt to the slot and what the broadcaster or the platform pays for that slot, that particular slot. In this case, broadcasters. On the other side, on platforms that have a completely on-demand content, they don't have a schedule. They don't have that grill with you have all the hours and all the programs. They are more open, and in those cases the amounts vary a lot depending on the type of project, the star power, the size of the project, and then those amounts will vary a lot. So this is one of the main differences between the broadcasters and the platforms. So that's why many times you open Variety and or any other any trade publications, and you see sometimes Netflix struck a deal with this actor or that director, and he's going to pay for 20 million, or the new Scorsese movie, or etc. etc. That's because they can do it. They can do it. Broadcasters won't do that, mostly because they work with slots that usually are based on the amount of advertising that they get. Platforms are usually, because they don't have advertising so far, it seems that they will be. They're usually worried about the amount of subscriptions that they can retain. So they are usually wanting to keep your eyeballs. So that's why they can invest in a different way than broadcasters. So far, do we have questions? Can you give some actual dollar amount to expect? Well, that varies on the project. For example, if you are, let's talk about, in case everybody knows, Netflix, for example. They can invest in small countries like Portugal, for example, or Greece, or smaller countries. They can invest very little money because the production costs in those countries are small, unless they feel the project has an international appeal. But basically, it's basically their own judgment. If you have a great star power, a great cast, a great package, there are no limits. You can look at Scorsese at the Irishman is a great example. They spent, I think, over $100 million in that project, something like that. Sometimes they spend a lot of money, sometimes they don't. It depends on the content. The thing is that for platforms, there isn't really a rule or a table that you can say X for this type of film, Y for this type of film, W for this type of film. If they have this, they keep it for themselves. Um, so let's advance. I think we lost Scott.
I am here.
Oh, okay, good.
Can you hear?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. Yeah, you
Okay.
go ahead and move forward.
Okay. Well, like I said, the thing here is that, and this is an interesting discussion. Here in Europe, here in Europe, in most European countries, the government demands from distributors to make their numbers public. So I know exactly how many people saw my film or someone else's film because those numbers are made public by law. Same thing with exhibitors. That rule still does not apply to platforms. So we producers, we do not have a real idea of if what they're paying is fair or not. I think we still have a lot of fighting to do. You have been in strike recently. I think you're still on strike, right? So I think in the future, this will be a fighting ground to make those numbers public so we can understand better, which is going to be very tough because the platforms will never want to make those numbers public for obvious reasons. Okay. By the way, because we only have 90 minutes or so, this is a very, very, very watered down version of the courses that I give online and at the university. At the end, I'm going to give you a link. Scott is going to make available a link for a much more comprehensive version of this, where you can have a lot more information. I edited a lot out for because of the time we have. So pre-sales is the next type. Pre-sale happens through usually a distributor, a national distributor, or a sales company. I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with the person of the role of the sales company. Basically, a sales company is a company that represents the film for the purpose of selling it worldwide to different countries. And they do this because us producers and filmmakers, we are not very knowledgeable about distributors in different countries. For example, I want my film to be distributed in 100 countries. I don't know in Thailand who is the best distributor for my type of film. I don't know in Mexico who is the one. I don't know in Ecuador or in Turkey. I don't know. But sales companies know because that's what they do. They sell films all across the world, and they get a commission on that. Now, there is also, I'm sure this question is going to come. There are many sales companies who are very bad, who are very dishonest. That is true. But there still is the need for that role. And the goal here is always to find a good sales company. And they also exist. So sometimes the sales company is going to give you an advance, which is a pre-sale. They're going to say something like this. We think that your film has the potential for sell very well and make money in many different countries. So we can give you a pre-sale in advance while you're still under development. So usually they will give you some money in advance, and then they will give you, the pre-sale will be something like 10% at the signature of the contract, or 20%, something like that, and the rest at delivery, paid upon delivery. So producers can get that money, or they can get a loan from the bank for the remaining, and funnel that money into the production very early. Sometimes also there is your national distributor can give it directly to the producer also. So you can get a pre-sale from two sides. You can get from your own national distributor. Let's say, for example, that you're a French producer, or a Brazilian producer, or a Canadian producer, or an American producer. So your national distributor, the one who will be selling, the one who will be distributing your film nationally, he or she will give you an advance because they think that the film is going to make money in that market, or the sales company will do that for all the international markets that will buy your film. Usually, sales companies they sell your film on all the countries that are not your own. And this has a very simple explanation. When you are in your country, you can call directly many distributors in your country and talk to them directly. So you don't have to go through a sales company and pay them a fee, right? If you can handle the distribution contract yourself. And the same thing happens with co-producers. If you are co-producing, let's say, Spain, France, and Canada, the sales company will probably handle the sales of all the countries except these three. Sometimes the sales companies are also distributors, and this is also something that is fairly common. And they will not only handle the sales of your film worldwide, but they will also distribute your film in their own country, on a number of countries where they also work as distributors. So the landscape is fairly wide. You can find many different types of sales companies. Some are specialized in genres, some are specialized in art house, some are specialized in documentaries, some are specialized in specificities of the projects. Like, for example, there are sales companies who only usually sell films from a particular region, like Scandinavia, for example. Some will be only looking for projects of a certain language, like English, or let's say, I don't know, Arab, something like that, or Spanish. So there is a wide variety of sales companies. They exist all over the world, and if you want to meet them, you should go to film markets. The Marché du Film in Cannes is the biggest market in the world. Also AFM in America, EFM in Berlin. There are also many different sales film markets happening around the world, usually around film festivals like Sundance, TIFF in Canada, Rotterdam, also for art house. There are many. Fantasia has a Frontier co-production market, which is very good for genre films. I love it. So you meet sales companies in many of these film markets, and you talk to them, you show them your project, and they will give you feedback. And if they really like the project, they can do a lot for you. Now, questions?
Yeah, we had some really good ones just come in.
Let me say something, Scott. The pre-sale is a double-edged sword, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. If you get a pre-sale, it comes with a cost. Mm-hmm. The first thing is that you lose power. If your distributor or your sales company gives you a pre-sale, they will usually want to have the final say in how they sell the film. Because many times, once they give you a pre-sale, recouping that money becomes paramount to them.
Right.
So you have to be careful on that. I mean, usually when you have a sales company, you have the final decision. If, for example, they want to sell my film to Turkey, or let's say America, and they offer me $1,000 or a very crummy deal, I can say no. It's my responsibility.
Yeah.
But if they give me a pre-sale, many times I lose this right. Also, we all know that many films will not make any money. That's the reality of the game. So be very careful if you have people who are expecting to get paid back, because many times if you get a pre-sale, that's the only money you'll ever see. Mm-hmm. Because we know that the film will not make a lot of money, and most of that money that was given to you on the pre-sale will have to be recouped first before the money gets to you. Yeah. So you have to, as a producer, you have to think carefully if you really need and if you want a pre-sale. Most people will want it and need it, and they will go for it. But you have to check with investors if you have some, and we'll talk about them later.
They really do become a partner at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So generally speaking, what is the type of commission sales companies are looking for?
Okay, usually it's 20%, but of every sale that comes, every money that comes through them, so it's 10%. That's why, like I said, if you can skip them on your own national market, great for you. But sometimes they do 15%, sometimes they do 30%. It depends. By the way, there is no judging the quality of the sales company if they ask 15 or 30. Usually they ask 20. Okay, but you don't really say that. You cannot see that if they're good or bad based on what they offer you. They usually will calculate many things into the offer. How much they think the film will make, how sure they are that the film is going to make money, how eager they are to have the film in their catalog. So there are many issues that come into play, but usually the normal is 20%.
Okay, and then how would one go about shopping for a sales company?
Film markets. If you go to the Marché du Film in Cannes, which is, I think, an experience every filmmaker should have. You basically and the American film market in Santa Monica is similar, but Cannes is much better and bigger. What basically you're going to see is sales companies. Okay, it's called a market. Why? Because broadcasters, national distributors, exhibitors, they all go there to buy films. And they buy from whom? They buy from sales companies. Okay, so basically that's what we have. That's what you have in a big film market. By the way, people usually, there is this disproportionate importance. You see, for example, Cannes. 90% of the press go see the red carpet and the stars and everything, right? Yeah, but the real thing that happens, the 90% of the business really happens at the market. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really get a coverage to us normal people because it's not glamorous as the red carpet. It's like the difference between haute couture, high fashion, and pret-à-porter and ready to wear. You see. In fashion, you see all the people covering the catwalks at Paris, but the big money is actually in the pret-à-porter. So it's same thing with film festivals. You have these big festivals, but the real business is in the markets.
Sure. Bridget has a little tip here that she's put together a list of distributors and sales agents by looking at IMDb Pro under credits for past movies.
Oh, good.
Probably a good idea also because you could say like, oh, this is my type of movie or my tone. These people already have experience shopping a similar type. So
yeah, one of the things that you do when you are going to a market is that you have to pay attention because it's very fairly because the sales companies, they have a booth at these markets and they show their products. So you see the posters, you see the screeners, they have a place for you to watch the films. Yeah. And you know immediately which sales companies handle your type of film.
Good point.
Most of them will be very open, not on the first days of the market because they are busy trying to sell. Yeah. But as the days go along and the business quiets down, they're much more open to meeting filmmakers and discussing that. Many times there is a great if those who want to go to Cannes, there is a great tool called Cinando, which is a kind of Facebook connected to the Cannes Film Festival for the marché, for the market. And they all have all the people who are attending, the companies that are attending. There is something similar with the AFM, something similar for the EFM, the European Film Market, that takes place in Berlin, usually in February. So there's something interesting that no one is hearing us. It's just between us. There are some Facebook groups dedicated to finding the bad sales agents. So if you spend some time,
that's the pro tips right there.
Yeah, and the best thing, I mean, if you're in doubt between a sales company, look at the films, talk to the producers of those films, and ask them.
Yeah. So Renetta has a lot of really wonderful questions. I'll just do this one for now. Do broadcasters and platforms not want to provide financing to first-time producers? Or does
that's a problem. Yes, okay. That's a problem because, let's say, for example, Netflix. Netflix is a huge company. They don't want to be bothered with me. They don't know me. They don't know you. They don't know us. Usually, what they will do is if they like your project, what they usually do is they want you to have a bigger company that already does business with them to handle the delivery. Okay, yeah. It's kind of tough to get to those companies, but depending on the film market, sometimes you can speak to them. Let me give you an example. I'm friends with the people from Fantasia, from Frontier. which is the co-production market that exists in Canada, Montreal, alongside the Fantasia Film Festival. And many times they do bring people from HBO, Netflix, and all the big players.
Sure.
And there is opportunities for you to sit with them and present your project, and start the conversation.
Right.
Okay? It all starts with the pitch, which is something that all of you are very well aware of.
Mm-hmm.
But outside the markets, it's difficult. It's true. You cannot send an email and expect them to answer. They will never answer.
Right, right. Well, you can definitely find a lot of info on pitching on the ISA site. But there were a lot of questions. I've starred all of them. If you answered or asked a question recently, and if we have time, we'll circle back. But we'll try to keep moving forward because there's so much good content coming still.
Goody. So let's go back. Okay, so the next type is advertising. So there are three types of advertising and how they can help films. Sponsorship is the first. Usually, how sponsorship works is like this. A company will align with a producer. Why? Because they see that there is a communion in terms of style, in terms of message, in terms of politics, in terms of whatever. And they will commit themselves to give you money in exchange for a sponsorship deal. And here's how it happens. Usually the sponsors don't get a very, very, very visible role, okay? This is more common with documentaries. This is more common that films that have let's say a positive impact in society, something like that, okay? It's very rare to find the sponsorships in a zombie movie, okay? Usually sponsorship is the kind of, we see a lot of sponsorship in sports, for example, and causes that advance something that in I don't know, global warming. Sponsorship usually has this element. There is money that is being given to the filmmakers in exchange for a limited visibility, so that you will not see the product on the film, but you will see a big thank you on the credits, and also you're going to see them with you. They're going to want to be with you in the awards season. They want to be credited in all the documentation that circulates with the film. So it's a very, I would say, elegant form of being in the film. But obviously, because it's very discreet, because it tends to be discreet, it will not be available to all films. In America, there is a great one that I like very much called Women Make Movies. I'm sure many of you have heard. They have a sponsorship program for films that are produced and directed and written by women, which is a great way it's a great source of funding. And they are very prestigious. They bring a lot of prestige to the film because they choose their films very well. Usually they don't like to be the first money on the film. They usually like to be complementary type of funding. They don't fund a lot. I mean, I don't think you can expect to fund 50% of the project. They tend to give smaller amounts to more films. And there are many other sponsors like that. And also brands that also do that. Not only this example I gave is a specific institution that sponsors films, but brands also do that. There are many different types in many different countries. By the way, the Women Make Movies basically is a tax shelter. Okay, they do get their money through tax shelter schemes, I believe, and then they sponsor directly films that they choose. That's where most of their money, I think, comes from tax shelters that exist in I think in New York and other states. I'm not sure anymore. But there you go. Now, when it comes to brands, although they do sponsorship, what they like best is product placement. So product placement is the second type, and then you have a very commercial, very very quick, very obvious participation. When you do see the project, you do see the content, you do see the bottle, the car, the clothing, etc., etc. So there are obvious gains there. You see, you have James Bond movies. Tentpole movies are very good for that because they command huge audiences. That's why they are so good at sponsoring. And actually, a big chunk of those big tentpole movies are a big chunk of that is financed through product placement. Especially films like James Bond, and they have dozens of brands that pay to be there. A great example I can remember is in that movie I, Robot with Will Smith. If you watch the movie, you're going to see that in the beginning he wears All Stars tennis shoes because the guy is obsessed with the past. He doesn't like the robots, so he's always characterized as someone who has old products. And so he puts, I remember this clearly. He buys All-Star shoes. He puts them on his feet and he says, "Think of beauty." And it's a big shot of the tennis. Also, all the cars in the movie are Audi. And the message is clear. You know, in the future, the design at Audi will be the rule for the future of cars, etc., etc. So it's clear. You have to be careful though, because this type of financing comes with a lot of strings attached. So you should be working with them very early. And of course, creatively, it's better because if you work early, you can put that through the film in a less intrusive way. You can make it part of the try to, of course, make it part of the story. So the producer should bring those relationships as soon as possible. Sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes it takes time to negotiate, and there are many obstacles there. But I think that the earlier you bring that into the film, the better it is for the writer. So you have less you have less the horrible experience of watching the film and then someone opens a computer and it's an Apple computer, obviously. In many times when you don't have a product placement, many producers go there and put a black and take out the brands. You see that all the time. And that happens for many reasons. In many European countries, for example, they don't like a product placement. So you have to be careful about the product placement regarding certain countries. Not all countries allow you to have a product placement on television, for example. So you have to be careful and understand your own national context. But America does this all the time. America is very easy for that. Barter is the third type, and it's also very simple. It's not so simple, but I'll explain how it works. Barter works when you have a deal with the television, and you're working with a TV company that does not pay for content because they don't have money. They are a small channel, and you want to produce for them, and they don't have the money. What you do is, with barter, you offer them the content already produced, and then they will give you the advertising time that you can resell to media buyers. So usually, what you do is when you're negotiating with a broadcaster a barter deal, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to give them the TV show that you're producing with the commercial spots already in place. So they never have to cut for commercials because the cut for commercials is already there when you delivered it with the TV show. This is not available for movies because it can be available for movies or for TV movies. Okay, for TV content only barter. But that's how it usually goes. It usually goes with small channels that don't usually have money to pay. But if they have the audience and they are willing to give you the commercial time, and they have let's say that they have 3 breaks or 4 breaks for commercials, you can negotiate all of it or 50% of that time, and then you're on your own to sell it, and then you recoup the money, the production money. Do we have questions so far?
There is, but as we're running a little long, let's go ahead and take since we're so close to the end of your list, We can
Okay.
maybe just collect these questions and then we'll address
Really?
them all at the end.
Okay.
But first, a thank you for a lot of people have been saying thank you for sharing this great info.
Thank you very much. I'll give you them the link to the entire course later. So equity financing is the next type. So there are many different types of equity financing. This is a very broad term that is used to describe complex relationships. Usually it implies ownership or a stake on your film, on your intellectual property. It can be an expensive type of financing, but it's very effective. And usually, this is how they can usually own a percentage of a film. They can own a percentage of a company or a percentage of the IP rights of the intellectual property. Okay, so this is something that is freely negotiated between you, the filmmaker, the producer, and whoever wants to invest in your film. So usually the question will be how much money they're willing to put, then how much equity they want to own from the project or the company, how much he or she expects from the returns, and how they want to be repaid in first place, in second place. Usually they want first place, obviously. And that's why this is sometimes expensive money, because if you really need the money, they will ask for conditions that put you in certain disadvantage. Sometimes, not always. So investors know that the film business is risky. That's why they are willing to put a premium on that such investment. And sometimes it's going to be expensive. And this means the issue of risk. You know, when you're working with other goods, there is always the possibility of recouping some percentage of the risk of the money. If you're producing, let's say, TVs, there is always a way to get the money back. You can sell the factory, you can sell the machinery, you can sell the inventory at a discount and make some money back. With movies, that doesn't happen because the wardrobe is rented. You know, every value is in the film itself. So there is very little stuff that you can sell. If so, you can lose a lot of money. You can lose everything in the film. So it's not a good comparison between films and ordinary goods because the risk is considerably higher. So at the equity investment, we usually look for these three categories. So the business angel is a different type of investment for equity. While equity investment comes from any person, you know, your father can own equity in your film, or you can bring a friend and a dentist, a doctor, you know, who has a lot of money, and he or she will buy some equity, or a company, or another company, another film company can come in and invest in your company, and you'll be together. A business angel is different. Business angels are professional investors. Okay, they usually come together in big funds for investment funds, and they invest in many different countries and many different companies at the same time. What they are looking for is for the rise in value of the company over the years. So in many cases, they are expecting the company to grow from zero, and in 5 years, they are hoping to sell their share and make the money back. You see this in a lot in digital. In the digital context, and you see all these companies that are coming out of nowhere, Facebook, Twitter, etc., and in the beginning they need investment. They go to who? Business angels. They're the ones who put the seed capital that start funding those companies. And this also happens with movies. So those investors may want to make the money back in a few years and sell their share at the bigger value that they had in the beginning. Gap financing. That's what I just said. So gap financing is a slightly different type of financing. There are basically three types of gap that I call gap. So it's usually the last money that you get on a film because it's very expensive money to get. There is gap financing, super gap financing, and bridge financing. There are different types of combinations, but these are the three basic ones. Usually, when you have exhausted all your financing sources and there is nothing else you can do, where do you go? You go to a bank. The problem with banks is that banks want a hard collateral, so they will never get the movie itself as a guarantee for your money. So they will ask if you have a house, if you have a car, if you have gold, if you have stocks, whatever you have. They may accept those. But there will be also the problem that banks may not give you all the money you need because of those constraints regarding the collateral. That's where gap financing comes. So gap financing is, you try gap financing when even the banks won't give you the rest of the money that you need. So gap financing will lend you the money in exchange for all the rights to all the territories that the film hasn't been sold yet. So they do take rights from the film, unlike a bank. Now, gap companies, financing companies that do gap, they usually are managed by people who have worked decades in distribution, in exhibition, and they know the market very, very, very well. And of course, obviously, goes without saying, because they are looking for recouping the money, this will not be necessarily the best investment for, let's say, documentaries or art house films that are not expected to make the money back easily. And they will be paying attention to that. They will actually look at the forecast of sales agents. They will do their own forecast regarding the potential for sales of the film, etc., etc. Super gap financing is slightly different because while the gap financing is usually goes up to 10% or 15% of the budget of a film, super gap financing goes a little bit higher. Okay, that's why there is this slight distinction between gap and super gap financing. Now, so the amount of interest here is horrible. So you should only use gap financing at the last minute when you really need it, and try to pay it as soon as you can. Bridge financing is fascinating because it's very interesting. Let's say that you have actors and they're going to be on your film, and your financier wants a commitment from them, and the actors demand the payment before committing. So you have this catch-22 where you must pay the actors to guarantee the actors, but your financiers will only give you the money once you guarantee the actors. So you have the bridge financier who comes in. He or she will lend you the money. They will put the cash on an escrow account for the actor that only the actors can touch. Once you tell the actors' agents or whoever is running the show, they will say, "Okay, we are confirmed." And then you take that information to your financiers. Your financiers then release the money, and you can pay the bridge financiers with a small interest. Now, this entire thing sometimes takes 10 hours or something like that. So it's a very fast type of financing because it's designed to solve this catch-22 situations where you need X, but you need the money from Y, and you don't get it. So that's how it goes. Deferrals are a different type of financing, and I'm sure you all have been through that before. Let's say that Kate Blanchett is in the film, so she accepts to waive 50% or 40% or 30% of her salary in exchange for a position as an executive producer. You can do this with the director, you can do this with the writer. We don't like it, of course, but sometimes we have to do it because the film doesn't have enough cash to advance to production and all the way through delivery. Sometimes the producer needs to keep the budget very low for many different reasons, and they will ask people to defer. So usually they will defer a percentage of their salaries or all of their salaries. And this happens many times in first films when people are really trying to get a little money to make a small film, and everybody defers. And the money will be paid later if there is some contingency left. They can, okay, usually they will get paid if there is revenues. Many times there are no revenues. But they know, I mean, that's the rule of the game. So when you're deferring, there is always some risk there implied. Producers, actors, directors, crew, everybody can defer. It depends on what's needed and what everybody wants to do. Music services is an interesting case. There are companies that will invest in your film regarding music. And how does this work? We know that many times 10% of a budget goes to music. That happens many times. So these music companies, they will come to the producer and they're going to say, okay, we will give you a composer. We will let you choose a composer from our group we will produce the music you need. We will give you, even if you need music which we don't control, we will create our own masters. We will do a lot of things. By the way, I have a course on music licensing for films. I'll give also the link later. And in exchange, so you don't have to pay for the music as a producer. They will come with all the music services available. They will record the music. They have the musicians. They have the studios. They have the artists. They have everything that you need. There is a catch, though. The catch is that the music does not belong to the producer. It's in the film, but it will be monetized by them. So they will want this film to be well distributed, of course. So not all films can use this type of service. And a few years from now, sometimes, if you want the music to continue on the film, you as a producer has to pay. You will have to pay. So there are quirky things that you have to be aware of when you work with this type of financing. Then you have goods and services and facility support. This is very simple. When you have, let's say, the company that is renting you the camera and all the equipment. You don't want a freebie, because when you do your freebie, it's going to be problematic for you. But many times you can convert them into investors. So they will calculate the amount of money that those equipment will cost, that equipment will cost, and you will bring them into the project as partners. And the equity they will have is the amount of the money that service would cost. So usually this happens with equipment, with facilities, rental houses, any company that believes in the project, loves the project, believes in you, and accepts to be a partner. And many times filmmakers can get a lot of good relationship, good of stuff from those agreements. Crowdsourcing, licensing. I'm not going over licensing a lot, because licensing is something that usually happens with big films. Okay, licensing happens when you have an intellectual property that has the potential to grow outside the realm of film. Let's say that you have children's content, and there is a potential there for toys, for licensing. Many times, early in the development, you have to start contacting those potential partners who will be licensing from you your intellectual property, because making toys, making stuff based on your content will take a lot of time. So you should be careful to start negotiating those deals very early. I would say at least 1 year before you enter production, because development of products take a lot of time. But some projects, they get a lot of financing through licensing. It's harder when you're starting. It's easier when the project already has an installed fan base. Second season, third season, something like that. But you can get some money there. Not all projects, obviously, but some projects can do that. Crowdsourcing is a very interesting thing. Recently, we saw this on Bohemian Rhapsody. The producers had an app that you could sing songs of Queen and record that and send it to them. There was a fine print that you should read, and you were basically giving that recording to the producers, and they used that to reproduce the people singing in the concert scene of the film. That those hundreds of voices were actually recorded through that app, which is an amazing idea. I would kiss the floor of the people who thought of this, because this was really brilliant. And which means that in crowdsourcing, there will be no money transactions. There will be work that's going to be done for other people. You can do this in documentaries, for example, for research, added research. You can do this for transportation. You can do anything, fiction, documentaries, anything you can do. The downside of crowdsourcing is that sometimes the work may not be as good as you expected, and sometimes you have to undo stuff that is done unprofessionally, and there is a problem there. So people do this because of kindness, because they want to participate, they love films, they want to help filmmakers, etc., etc. So no money is involved. Now, so make sure that everybody understands that when you're doing that. Crowdsourcing is like crowdfunding is slightly different. There will be then a platform that will be exchanging money. You will be asking for money, cash, not just work. And there are two platforms, Kickstarter and Indiegogo, that exist for that. And on the course that I give a very thorough description of how campaigns work. It's fascinating, and it's a lot of hard work, let me tell you. But usually there are three components here. There is the campaign itself, there is the people who donate, and then there is the rewards or incentives that you are giving to people. So there are big differences between the platforms, Kickstarter and Indiegogo. The big one is that Kickstarter works on a logic of all or nothing. So you only get the money if you reach your goal, while Indiegogo works on a flexible amount. So if you ask for 100,000 and you only get 50, that's what you get. As a result, this has an impact on everything. So because it's all or nothing, there's higher pressure on Kickstarter, less campaigns, better campaigns, more donors, better donors, and more guarantees. Indiegogo, on the other hand, because it's not necessarily as a lot of pressure, they have more campaigns. The campaigns vary a lot, and less people giving money. So you have to choose which one is better for you based on the amount you're asking for, the how badly you need the entire amount, how much work you're going to put into your campaign, and finally the amount of hours you're going to dedicate to running your campaign, because it's going to take it's a full-time job, let me tell you. Great examples: Iron Sky, they got 590,000 euros. I wish I was here. Over almost 3 million. The Veronica Mars movie years ago, over 5 million. So it's a lot of work. I would say this is a good way to finance films. Not a lot of money there, but you can try to get some. There's definitely some money there, but not for all projects. And finally, awards and grants. Awards and grants, usually it's the first money on many financing plans, because they usually come very early. You get those in film festivals and film markets where they have contests for pitching contests, co-production contests, screenplay projects that are in development funds, and there are many different ways of start the financing of your project. And that's good, because when you get that money, it usually comes with a lot of prestige. The Uberhebals Fund is usually connected with Rotterdam. I think they cover many countries and many different areas, usually from less developed nations. The World Cinema Fund, connected to the Berlin Film Festival, the Berlinale, has a very similar goal. And you also have here, this is very recent, the Red Sea Souk, which I think just closed. They have here, as you can see here, they take, it's for Arabic or African filmmakers. So they have a development award of $35,000. They have a special mention production award. They also have a post-production award. So there's a lot of money that you can get if you spend some time looking for that type of money. And you can many times complement the money you already have, or start your financing plan with the first money that you have. Questions? So we get to the end of the 10 classes.
All right. Well, first off, thank you so much. And like, I think everybody watching can appreciate that. Well, this guy knows his stuff. You're passionate and you're very knowledgeable about everything you're talking about. I know that you've got so much more to share. So I think a great question that came in, it was a while ago. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. Don Abrams. Hope he's still with us. You had your list of 10 sources, 10 places to go. Is that the order in which people should be approaching and looking for funding, or
not at all? Not at all. Not at all. It depends on the movie, depends on your context. The work of the producer who is composing his or her financing plan will be an eternal trial and error, trying all of them at once and trying to see which money you can unlock first. There isn't an order. It is what you need. Well, you have to understand that some types of financing prefer to come later, and some prefer to come early. That's also, you have to understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Let's see. Oh yeah, let's see.
Someone said something here about Seed and Spark, which is a crowdfunding platform that allows the backers to keep a small equity in the project. Yeah,
it's another good one. I've heard good things about that one. I haven't experienced it, used that one at all myself, but I know that's another.
The problem with those platforms, it all has to do with the number of people who are there giving money. That's why I give the examples of Kickstarter and Indiegogo, because they're the bigger ones, dedicated to not just film, but they have a big amount of people.
Big market share. Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a good question just about you in general. Is there something that you wish you knew about film financing when you began your career? Maybe a lesson learned along the way for you?
Yes, absolutely. The big thing that I wish I had learned before is this: networking. Mm-hmm. Networking. I learned this when I was a film student. I went to Cannes. I went to the film market. That was in the late 90s. I got out of school on a Friday. I bought a plane ticket at the airport. I went to the supermarket, stuffed my bag with cookies. Then I went to Cannes. I didn't have a hotel. I had nothing, and I stayed there 2 days. I took a shower on the fountain, and I met great people, and I understood. Oh my God, networking.
Right.
It is true.
So, great one from Renetta. I've seen set in the U.S., but let's say they're in a house or a coffee shop. Can I still shoot abroad to qualify for funding? So that is when talking about.
I have my scenes. It depends. Yeah, if you're working with regional film fund, in many times yes, in many times not always. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they only care about the money you bring, and the scenes can be definitely. And there are many movies like that you can see that you don't know. It's so well done that you think that you're talking about, I don't know, Peoria, Sheboygan. Sheboygan, I think it's Wisconsin.
Yeah.
But it's actually shot in the Czech Republic, or right. It can be Malibu, but it's a beach in Portugal. It depends. Many times it can happen.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of The Righteous Gemstones on HBO, which that's set in the southern states, and that's of the U.S., and some of that at least is shot in Ireland, which I never would have guessed. But there are other ones that really want to highlight the actual place of filming.
Yes, there are also some of those funds that have a tourism goal, and some of them. But like I said, they will make it clear for you when you read the rules.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's never something that you go blindly. No, they tell you.
Sure. Here's another one about a shooting in Italy, where an American company, they have 3 different locales in Italy. Would it be possible to get a national or regional funds from the Italian government for this film?
For that, I would suggest you have an Italian co-producer. But let me tell you, Italy is a horrible regarding bureaucracy. Yeah, it's notorious. We wait. If you have a good producer, a co-producer there, if you can have a co-producer that will do that for you, yes.
Sure.
In many cases, I think yes.
Okay. Renetta also had one about post-production. Are there, and I'm kind of tail spinning off of her question a little bit, but are there other, regional incentives for finishing funds and things like that? Yeah,
because like I said, the regional film fund wants you to bring the money, and they will say to you, "Oh, can you also do the post here?" And if they do have the facilities for post-production, yes, you can bring. They will give you money, and you can also bring your money and do the post there, and then you qualify. Regional film funds, and many times they will do all that they can, like the example I give, Belgium, Luxembourg, Netherlands, they usually do this very well. In many different parts of Europe or South America, they also have that. It's not only shooting, it's also post-production.
Great. So I know there's a few people asking this question. How can we contact you? Let's make sure we get that out.
Oh, don't worry. Scott will give my email to everybody.
Okay, I'll just throw that up here right now while we're talking about it. I'll put this up again later as well.
Yes.
But there is Paulo's direct email. A guy that obviously knows the stuff.
We can talk. We can talk on Zoom. We can talk. I'm always available. I love to speak to people.
Here's another very specific question, but fascinating. I'm an American writer. Film is set in Ireland and France with major characters in Ireland, France, and Italy. Back to Italy. How would you suggest I approach funding sources from these countries?
It always goes back to having a co-producer. So if you have, it depends on where you want to shoot. Okay, if you think you can shoot in France and have some French crew, try to get a co-producer from France who, on his or her side, will guarantee that part. There will always be the problem because it will not be a treaty co-production. It will be an informal co-production, but I'm sure any good French or Irish producer can handle that situation. I would say that it can be a problem, but it also can be solved. Look, there are many films that are done exactly like that.
Okay. And it's another one from Linda, another in-depth one. Can investors recoup losses by leveraging their debt? Can taking a loss benefit the investor?
That you have to, I think it's still theoretically possible, but that you have to look at the specific context, fiscal context of those people. And also, you have to also look at the law, because sometimes you may
That's true.
rub with illegal, and sometimes it can be a problem. We would never want to go there. But yes, it can. I think I don't know that. I don't know a lot about that. You should look for accountants to help you with that. That's not something that I know a lot about.
That's a really good point, because I mean, there's so many different finance laws, even just in one country, let alone the world.
Exactly.
So here's getting back into advertising. I know it's going to be a case-by-case basis, but could you look at production budget as a percentage getting through advertising?
Usually, if I understand the question well, you're not talking about a percentage. You're talking about figures.
Okay.
Because basically, when you go into any relationship regarding advertising, you have to understand what the brand or what the client wants, what they expect to get. So it depends on how much the film will be, how successful will be the film, how much audience it will command in how many countries. It may be a local brand, it may be an international brand. It's completely different. Well, basically it's the same, but what they're looking for is different. If you approach Coca-Cola, it's difficult that they're going to waste time with a small documentary or a small art house film. Big brands want big films because they want big numbers,
impact.
Big recognizability. Yeah, big impact. But there are still a lot of small brands, local brands that will go for. I'm a huge fan of Cheerwine. For those who are in the Carolinas, oh my God, I could live on that, and we don't have that in Europe. I was married to an American man, and oh my God, I used to drink so. That's the only thing I miss about my marriage.
We might have our next Wine Wednesday sponsor at this rate. That's great.
So if anyone ever wants to see me in America and buy me Cheerwine, I'm there. I'm game.
Cheer, CHEER.
Cheerwine, yeah, Cheerwine. It's a thing. It's fun. Carolinians know.
All right, I got to look it up. I'm a Midwesterner. I'll do 3 more questions and hopefully fairly fast. So, is there a way to find tax specialists by region, tax attorneys per region, that you would suggest?
I don't know that. I cannot speak on that. I mean, I'm sure there are. Well, ask around. It's very simple. I shouldn't give names because they are worth. The personal experiences vary a lot. I don't like to give names, but here's the thing: you can always ask around. You should ask around. Even if I give you five names, that's worthless because my experience may not be yours.
Sure.
They may be great for me, but they may be lousy for you. So you should ask around. Ask other producers.
Okay. And again, as you mentioned earlier, festivals, film markets, those are great
Festivals, you
places.
should go to those places. I say this to everybody: save some money, go to Cannes or Berlin or whatever is close to you. You don't
Sure.
have to across the Atlantic. Um,
Sure.
and always look for the type of film that you're making. If you're making an art, here's the thing: if you're making an art house film or a very small documentary with a tough subject, maybe the AFM is not the place for you. The AFM is the big place, it's the circus, okay?
Sure. Yeah.
But if maybe Telluride is the place to go, maybe Sundance, or maybe, I don't know, TIFF or New York Film Festival, I don't know. There are many. And look for the type of, there are gay film festivals, there are Jewish film festivals, there are black film, African American film festivals, there are
And genre specific.
yeah, genre specific. Look at the film you're producing. Look at the best. Try to look for the best festivals for that type of film. Go there.
Right. Absolutely.
Especially if there is a market side happening. Try there.
So this one came in very early. I think when we were talking more about different regions and territories, different countries having incentives. So Roy was asking about organizations for filmmakers that are trying to shoot in the U.S. And
foreign.
Well, I think U.S. filmmakers trying to shoot in the U.S. as opposed to you were talking. Yeah.
There are, but they come and go. The problem with these, you should look at the guilds. Sometimes they have that information. There are groups that have that information. The problem is that these types of financing schemes, many times they come and go. You know, certain states has a great scheme that a tax credit that the next year does no longer exist, and then another one opens up in the next state. It changes a lot. Things change very quickly. The good thing is that when you go to when you go to film markets, many of those states and incentives, they are also there. When you go to Cannes, for example, outside the Palais, there is what they call the marina, the places outside the venue.
Sure.
And many of those of tax incentives, many of those organizations, they are there precisely because filmmakers will go there and meet them and discuss with them. And they also have roundtables. It's a great experience. And they are also in America. If you go to those festivals and markets I mentioned, you can meet those people there many times. Or you can Google, I mean, a film incentive, North Carolina.
Exactly what I was going to say. Most states, probably all states, and just about every major city has a film office, and they would have a lot of those resources. And as far and also all of the information that have tax incentives. Yeah,
exactly. Big cities have, states have. I know, for example, when we're talking about tax incentives, remember the tax incentive, the tax rebate, the ones that based on VAT. Now, well, for example, I know that in America. Alaska, Oregon, Montana, Delaware, and I think New Hampshire, they have zero sales tax, I think. I think are those. So obviously that kind of incentive will not be found in those states for obvious reasons.
Sure.
But tax credits they may have, you know. So and if you I think total currently, I think you have 35 states in America actually have good or decent tax incentives, and 10 more may have small stuff. But I would say, yes, you have big cities and states who have autonomous funds, and you can combine them all. I mean, in the course that I give, that you're going to have giving the link, I give you at the end examples of many different financing plans where you can combine all of those types of financing together, and you can see films from $200,000 to $35 million.
Gotcha. Huge. Here's a quick one. Are you going to send us up your slides? Is there somewhere is somebody?
No, I'm gonna do better. I'm gonna give you a link for the course. Where the course has several hours. It's a very long course. I start with development, and I speak very horrible things about writers. So I treat writers like cattle, like Hitchcock to I'm not Hitchcock. I would love to, but I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. So be kind with me, because the course is on the perspective of the producer. Okay. So I'm very mean, but I love writers. I'm one of them. but it is what it is.
Sure.
But I go through the entire development process, what you have to have in order to try to get the best financing chances if possible. Then I go thoroughly for all these classes of financing, several hours here, and then I'll show you many different types of financing plans, how those films combine all these 10 classes, and then I'll go also through a trial structure for a film business plan, what I think works and what has worked for me.
Right. So this is it's a wonderful segue of the concept, because we always tell our writers, any writer, you need to treat your passion, your writing, as a business, and it's a career. It's not a hobby. Anybody that's on this call already knows that easily. But part of that is that if you're in this, and we are 2 hours in right now, and we still have about 100 people watching, that means that these are all people that are ready to become writers/producers, that they are taking charge of their screenplay and where it's going to go next. You're already kind of a producer by being here. Well,
let me add this. Even if you're just a writer, eventually someone will say to you, I'm trying to get some money from Brazil. And in my case, I have a Brazilian passport. I can say, okay, if the co-producer is Brazilian, they can pay me and not you. So you can save money by having me as your writer.
Right.
Because I have the passport, I qualify as a Brazilian citizen. So if any of you have a French passport or a Hungarian passport or a Canadian passport, and I'm sure many of you can and never thought of this, get the passport, because you become an asset in that sense. Because now you know that many funds will be looking at who's doing what and the nationality of the people. So eventually, the more you know about film financing, the easier your relationship will be with the producer. Because now you know that sometimes you'll be asked to, okay, put the brand on the film. You say, what? WTF? No, now you know why. Because it's really needed. Or quick story. I'm a huge fan of spy novels. John Le Carré, everybody knows, the spy who came in from the cold. I was great film with Richard Burton and Clive Bloom, amazing film, an amazing book. And I read decades ago, I read Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, and I was always a fan. And I knew that the BBC in 1979 made a series of 6 episodes. And I bought the DVD, and I loved it because there is an episode that takes place in Lisbon. And I loved to see Lisbon in 1979. Now, 10 years ago or something, when they did the film with Gary Oldman, I was thinking, are they going to shoot in Portugal? No, they didn't. Where did they shoot? They shoot in Turkey. Why? So the Lisbon part became Turkey. Why? Tax incentives. So the writer who did the script, who was hoping to, I'll write Lisbon. No, the producer probably told him or her, okay, you have to write, let's put the scene in Turkey because, money. And I'm sorry, it's business. It's art, but it's also business.
It's a balance. Well, thank you so much, Paulo, for enlightening us. Everybody, there's so many comments about people's heads spinning because there's so much information. So yes, anybody watching, please do bookmark this and come back to it, and feel free to rewatch and retake notes because there was so much information and really a relatively small amount of time. This will be available as a replay immediately after we finish this live broadcast. Thank you all for attending. Thank you, Paulo, for joining. And any final things, social media or websites, anywhere else you want to direct people?
I'm on Facebook. Anyone can befriend me. I'm easy, like Sunday morning.
Love it.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a project and if you want to talk about movies, I'm always available. I love to talk about films.
Okay. Well, thank you.
And if you have a horror film, bonus.
Especially horror. All right. Thank you all, and we'll see you on the next ISA Live event.
Thank you
once
much.
more.
It was a pleasure.